Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Janavalabha Girivaradhari Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Janavalabha Girivaradhari Yashoda Nandana Braja Jana Ranjana Jamuna Tiravana Chari Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Janavalabha Girivaradhari Yashoda Nandana Braja Jana Ranjana Jamuna Tiravana Chari Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada. Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada. Viṣṇudūtas Paramahamsa Parivrajakacarya Stottarasata Shri Srimad Divine Grace Abhay Charanaravinda Bhakti Vedanta Swami Śrīla Prabhupada Bhagavan-nāma-saṅkīrtanaṁ ki jai, Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Bhakti Vrinda ki jai. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So today we'll take a look at Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 6, Chapter 1, Text 30. What's our standard procedure here? Do I go through one word at a time first, or? That's what they usually do. Okay. Nishamya Mriyamanasya Mukhato Hari-kīrtanam Bhaktyā-nama-maharaja Parshada Sahasapatan Nishamya Mriyamanasya Mukhato Hari-kīrtanam Bhaktyā-nama-maharaja Parshada Sahasapatan Nishamya Mriyamanasya Mukhato Hari-kīrtanam Bhaktyā-nama-maharaja Parshada Sahasapatam. Others, please. Nishamya Mriyamanasya Anyone else?
Nishamya Mriyamanasya Hari-kīrtanam Putra-Maharaja Parshada-sahasapatan
Take a shot. Nishamyam Riyamanasya Mukato Hari-kīrtanam Bhaktyā Parshada-sahasapatan. Synonyms: Nishamya, hearing; Riyamanasya, of the dying man; Mukhata, from the mouth; Hari-kīrtanam, chanting of the holy name of the Supreme Personality of Godhead; Bhaktyā, the holy name of their master; Maharaja, O king; Parshada, the order carriers of Viṣṇu; Sahasa, immediately; Apatan, arrived. Translation: My dear king, the order carriers of Viṣṇu, the Viṣṇudūtas, immediately arrived when they heard the holy name of their master from the mouth of the dying Ajamila, who had certainly chanted without offense because he had chanted in complete anxiety. Responsively, please. My dear king, the order carriers of Viṣṇu, the Viṣṇudūtas, immediately arrived when they heard the holy name of their master from the mouth of the dying Ajamila, who had certainly chanted without offense because he had chanted in complete anxiety. Srila Prabhupada's purport. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur remarks, Hari-kīrtanam nishyamapatan kṛtam bhūtasya bhartarnāma-saṅkīrtanaṁ. The order carriers of Lord Vishnu came because Ajamila had chanted the holy name of Narayana. They did not consider why he was chanting. While chanting the name of Narayana, Ajamila was actually thinking of his son. But simply because they heard Ajamila chanting the Lord's name, the order carriers of Lord Vishnu, the Viṣṇudūtas, immediately came for Ajamila's protection. Hari-kīrtana is actually meant to glorify the name, form, pastimes, and qualities of the Lord. Ajamila, however, did not glorify the form, qualities, or paraphernalia of the Lord. He simply chanted the holy name. Nevertheless, that chanting was sufficient to cleanse him of all sinful activities. Oops. It's just cited. I really like that. As soon as the Viṣṇudūtas heard their master's name being chanted, they immediately came. So what's the response time for the cops here? Like that, right? Wink of an eye. Blink of an eye? Maybe, am I getting old? Immediately. I mean, they were right on the spot. There was no, okay, what neighborhood is it? So we have to keep track of the, the response time of the police. In our neighborhood, oh yeah, it's going to be hour and a half. Oh, in that neighborhood, 3 minutes. Because they have those alarm thingies, and the companies are going to get in touch with the police department, and the cops are going to be, oh, We've got to go take care of that $1.25 million house, you know. But no consideration, right? I mean, they didn't even think about why he was chanting. All they heard the name of their master, they heard the name of their Lord, boom, on the spot. In this regard, Vijayadhvaja Tīrtha remarks, anena putra-sneham, antareṇa prācīnādṛṣṭa-balād, udbhūtayā bhaktyā bhagavan-nāma-saṅkīrtanaṁ kṛtam iti jñāyate. Ajamila chanted the name of Narayana because of his excessive attachment to his son. Anena putra-sneham. And he had this affection he was chanting out of affection for his son. He wasn't chanting out of love of Godhead. Nevertheless, because of his past good fortune in having rendered devotional service to Narayana, he apparently chanted the holy name in devotional service without offenses. Om ajnanatimirandhasya jnananjana shalakaya chakshurunmilitam yena tasmai Shri Gurave Namah. Mukhaṁ karoti vāchalam pangum langhayate girim jatkripatamahang bande Shri Gurun dinataranam. Shri Chaitanya manobhishtam sthapitam yena bhutale svayam rupa kadamahyam dadati svapadantikam. Nama Om Viṣṇupadaya Krishna Preshtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatideshatarine Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namah. Nishamya mriyamanasya mukato Hari-kīrtanam bhaktyur-nama-maharaja parshadasa hasapatan. My dear king, the order carriers of Vishnu, the Viṣṇudūtas, immediately arrived when they heard the holy name of their master from the mouth of the dying Ajamila, who had certainly chanted without offense because he had chanted in complete anxiety. Or as we say in English, habit is second nature, right? And sadhana bhakti is all about developing habits. Habits of the senses, habits of the mind, habits of the heart. There was a book, maybe 35 years ago, that I really liked called Habits of the Heart. It was a sociological study of like living in community. The title struck me even then, and I thought, oh, I'm going to find out about this book. So, you know, we want to change. What's our definition of pure devotional service? Anyabilashita shunyam, jnana karmadhyanavrtam, anukulyena krishna anushilanam bhaktiruttama. That's Rupa Goswami's definition of Shuddha Bhakti or Uttama Bhakti, right? Anyabilashita shunyam, jnana karmadhyanavrtam. Setting aside aspirations for the goals of karma, which is bhoga, enjoyment, right? Yoga, which is siddhi, and jnana, which is moksha. Setting aside, completely rejecting those and everything else, just like the Bhagavatam says right at the beginning, second verse. Dharma projita koita votara paramo nirmatsaranam satam. Here's a book, here's a text for those who are completely pure in heart, the satam. And how do we know they're pure in heart? Nirmatsaranam. Because they're free from envy. They're free from this competitive spirit, from jockeying for position, from grasping the resources of material nature. I don't know if I've mentioned this here. I mention it too often. This is I shared it recently on Facebook. It came up as a memory. And I can't remember if I shared it on Facebook or with a small group of devotees on WhatsApp now that I think about it. Anyway. But there's a sentence in Srila Prabhupada's purport on that second verse that just completely changed my life. I'll get there in just a moment, but first I want to take care of the verse. Dharma pra-ujjita kaitavatra. So we know at the end of the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna's final instruction, manabhava madbhakto madhyaji mam namaskuru, and how practically to do that, sarva dharman parityajya mamekam sharanam vraja. Give up all conventional ideas of dharma, whatever they might be. Not just give them up, completely reject them. Parityajya, throw them away. Just like among the 6 angas of Sharanagati, which is a project that I kind of started making oral notes on when I was in Denver. I was trying to figure out what service I could do for the devotees, and I thought, well, actually, I'll do a service for myself and share it with the devotees. I'll let them watch me think aloud as I'm beginning to piece together this project that I've had on the back burner for a long time, writing a little book about Sharanagati. And so I thought I'll talk about that. So one of the angas is Atma Nivedana, Atma Samarpana, or Atma Nikshepa. It's given 3 ways. It's also, Atma. So Atma Nikshepa means throwing away, casting away, just like, ugh! Make a big sneeze and you go, oh, get it off your hand, Then you go wash, but first your impulse is, get rid of that thing. Yeah. Unfortunately, I just got it on my little brother. So the same thing we see at the end of Bhagavad Gita, sarva dharman parityajya, not just tyajya, not just vairagya, not just, I'm not so interested in that stuff, but tyajya, no, get rid of it, walk away from it. No, parityajya, run away from any conventional sense of dharma. Because Krishna, over the last 600-odd verses, has presented this argument to Arjuna that he should fight. And he did it from so many different angles of vision, so many aspects of dharma. And then he says, forget it all. Right? Just like at the end of the chapter in the Uddhava Gita, the process of mystic yoga. And he prescribes this, how to meditate on the transcendental form of the Supreme Lord, Lord Narayana. And the description is very much like Narada Muni's description to Dhruva Maharaj back in the 4th canto, the different kinds of ornaments and, his color, the color of his clothes and all these things. And then he says, then you focus in on his face and meditate on his face. And then you look off into the sky. And then he says, forget the whole thing. Flush it. And just take shelter of me. This is the same, another, if Maitreya is here, leitmotif. Called me out yesterday. It's a word only. Actually, artists and musicians also, they notice leitmotifs in music or in art, these repeated patterns. So this is a repeated pattern throughout the Bhagavatam especially. Forget everything else and just take to bhakti. As I pointed out, we see over and over again throughout the Bhagavatam, starting in the 2nd chapter, which we'll take a quick look, one verse we'll take a quick look at in a minute, and certainly emphasized in the 5th chapter of the Bhagavatam, where Narada Muni is instructing Vyasadeva. Vyasadeva is sitting, after having compiled all the Vedas with the Upanishads and the Samhitas, and then the Puranas, and then the Itihasas, including the Mahabharata and Ramayana, all meant for the upliftment of human society, and still he's feeling empty in his heart. He's dejected, he's bummed out, he's depressed, and he's just sitting there and he can't figure out, what did I miss? What's wrong? Why this God-shaped hole in my heart, right? This Bhagavatam-shaped hole in my heart. He doesn't know that's exactly, he's sitting there, he's trying to figure. And this is Vyasadeva, right? There's a verse somewhere in the Bhagavatam. Shiva certainly knows, Shukadeva Goswami certainly knows. Vyasadeva may or may not know the import of the Bhagavatam. So Vyasadeva is sitting there, he's completely bummed out, he can't figure out why. Narada Muni He just shows up wherever. He has no restrictions. He doesn't have to have a visa to get anywhere. No stamps at a gate or anything. He just, boom, shows up, stirs things up quite often. And so he's schooling Vyasadeva here. He says, okay, so you've done all this work, but how does he characterize all that work? Compiling the Vedas, which means the Upanishads and the four Vedas with the Upanishads and the Samhitas, the Puranas, the Itihasas. How does he characterize it? Anybody know the word? Jugupsitam. Detestable. Loser, right? You're missing the real point. This is all nice, but as some devotees have characterized it, the Vedas can be like a jungle of sounds because there's something for everybody. There's something to elevate people in the mode of ignorance to the mode of passion, people in the mode of passion to the mode of goodness. But what's missing is something that actually brings them to the Shuddha Sattva, to the mode of purified goodness. There's something for people who are looking for mukti, looking for bhakti, looking for siddhi, right? There's something for everybody. And people get lost. They can get confused. Shaivites, they read the Shiva Purana and they see all the glorifications of Shiva as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. What they miss is like Vishnu Purana and the other Puranas, and certainly the Bhagavat, where Lord Shiva worships Lord Vishnu. And the Shaktas, they read the Durga Purana, Devi Purana, and they think, oh, Devi, she's the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Because those texts are made to instill faith in people who have who have those attachments, who have those deep samskaras in their hearts. So they're meant to give them faith in that practice so that they can dedicate themselves to it and become elevated. So it's like a jungle of sounds. You can't make it out. It's like people like me who have damage to their hearing. The VA has spent thousands. The Veterans Department of Veterans Affairs, their medical centers have spent thousands and thousands of dollars just on my hearing. And it's not a military service-related injury. It's a devotional service-related injury. One of my friends calls it kartal ear. And I've noticed actually that the acoustics in here are so much better. I mean, I used to think our acoustics in this temple were awful, and then I went to Alachua. Oh my God. It's like, whew. And other temples. I was in Houston recently, and I couldn't figure out whether I liked the acoustics or not until there was a big kirtan. Balaram, you remember the kirtan just before the initiation? God, I mean, it's like every cell of my body was vibrating with Giriraj Maharaj's chanting, and all the devotees' response. He just kind of like pulled our hearts out. And then the acoustics in that temple worked. But if it's just me leading a Mangal Arti or a Guru Puja Kirtan, I'm not sure I can actually hear things all that way. It's a little weird. Denver as well, I was a little, But here, I just noticed that somehow or other, maybe it's the acoustic tiles, because we've got like a marble floor. The walls are all pretty hard stuff. We don't have curtains all over the place to absorb the sound. But still, the acoustics in here are nice. So I don't know what got me off on that tangent. So anyway, Vyasadeva is sitting there bummed out, and Narada Muni is schooling him. This is what you've done. It's okay, but actually, compared with what you need to do, it's detestable. Because it's just going to confuse people. It's just going to create that jungle of sounds. And sometimes, I know that if there's too much ambient sound, and that doesn't have to be very much, if someone's speaking to me, I can't hear them. My brain can't sort, it's difficult for my brain to sort them out. And so I've got like settings on I need to reset my hearing aids. I've got settings on a little app that changes the settings on my hearing aids. So I have a setting for kirtans where it dampens the highest frequencies, because the metal stuff hurts my ears and completely scrambles my brain. That's kartals and the bells. And in Honolulu, we got big bells for Guru Puja and for the altar. And you get the kartals going, and I'm just like, I can't think. So it's just that, kind of sort of jungle of sounds. That's different. So he says it's just going to confuse everybody. What you've missed is a text that exclusively glorifies devotional service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. What you've missed is a text about Shuddha Bhakti. So, anyabhilashita shunyam jnana karmadhyanavartam anukulyena krishnanushilanam bhaktiruttama. What we call pure devotional service is setting aside all that other stuff, shutting out the jungle of sounds. And anukulyena krishnanushilanam, progressive, ongoing activity intended to give pleasure to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Anukulyena krishnanushilanam. And Jiva Goswami explains Krishna can include his incarnations, his different avatars, and all those kinds of things. But it's got to be Krishna. It can't be any other. So here we hear it's Narayan. This is not even primary. What Bhaktivinoda Thakur, I think in Harinama Chintamani, describes as primary names of the Lord. He's chanting a secondary name of the Lord, Narayana, Lord in Vaikuntha. Kind of generic, right? Because of previous impressions from his childhood, when there was worship of Narayana going on in his home, he was open to the Lord dictating, because the Lord knows. He's Trikalagna. He actually understands. There's no time for him. But he knows where Ajamila is headed. He's an old man still having kids. What's he got, 8, 10 kids? He's 88, and he's got this, at least, at best, at most he's a toddler. Little Narayan is toddler. He's still all, pudgy cute, doing all the little cutesy stuff. So it's like, Narayan, come here, have some of my soup. Oh, Narayan, you want a sip of my juice? Narayan, come sit on my lap. Oh, Narayan, you felt, it's like, Narayan. So, because of these previous impressions, much like Gajendra, right? Gajendra had the body of an elephant. Now, nowadays, we know, we're learning more and more about just exactly how intelligent elephants are. Not just intellectually, but also emotionally. There's a guy at UC Berkeley, can't remember his last name, Musaif or something like that, teaches Sanskrit and Bengali there as well, I think. But he wrote a book years ago called When Elephants Cry. And it was, I think, as I remember, it was a look at the social lives of elephants. So we're getting a sense more and more nowadays about just how intelligent elephants really are. The other day there's a video of it. Somebody stopped to let a herd of elephants across a road somewhere. And the last elephant, a bull, stopped and kind of gave a nod to the guy in the car. Like, oh, thank you. Jai Prabhu. Who'd have thunk it? We don't. Even those of us who, are a little open-minded, a little open-hearted, it's not some kind of thing that we would necessarily expect. That's why it surprises. That's why it went viral on social media. But Gajendra, he had the body of an elephant. You don't think of them as terribly bright, certainly intellectually, spiritually astute. But because of these samskaras, these impressions in his heart, these grooves, when he was in great danger, when he was in great anxiety, when he was actually under the threat of his life, he went right there. Got right into the groove. And so he was, all these prayers that he had learned in his previous lifetime, they just came out. So our sadhana, our practice, is to help us deepen these grooves in our hearts, these samskaras, so that when something happens, we don't call out some word that became very common to us in boot camp, 4-letter, one-syllable Anglo-Saxon word, one or the other. I used to say, you get out of boot camp, every third word you hear in boot camp starts with S or F. And the joke was, when you get home on boot camp leave, you're sitting at dinner with your parents and you're going to ask for the butter in a very embarrassing way. Going to describe the butter with one of those two words, and And of course, mom's going to be clutching at her pearls. But sadhana bhakti is meant to deepen the grooves in our, so that when we are in anxiety, we'll turn to Krishna. When there's a calamity, when there's a catastrophe, we'll turn to Krishna. Think about my old friend Narahari, who was flying somewhere when he was temple president in Miami many years ago. Something happened to the plane. Plane was, all of a sudden, it was losing altitude like crazy. And everybody on the plane is freaking out. And Narahari just thinks, oh, this is it? Boom, right into his bead bag. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. And there was actually, he was interviewed. When the plane landed, he was interviewed because everybody told him, well, that Hare Krishna dude, he was the only one on the plane that was able to keep his composure aside from the flight crew. And so they interviewed him and asked him about it, and so he talked about the benefits of chanting Hare Krishna. So that's where we go. King Kulashekar says, time of death, certainly full of anxiety. You don't know what's going on, you don't know where you're going to go, you don't know if you're going to go, or if you're just going to be extinguished like a little flame. Plus there's pain, and there's mental and emotional disorientation. You need to focus. So we pray that, well, if I'm nice enough throughout my life, maybe a few devotees will come chant, when I'm giving up my body. Even my dad. I don't think my dad had a lot of pious credits in this life. He didn't live exactly the sattvic lifestyle. His kids, all three of his kids grew up to live at least a more sattvic lifestyle than he did. He certainly didn't have it. But somehow or other, Krishna arranged for his older son, his oldest child, to be sitting there holding his hand, singing the Hare Krishna Mahamantra to him as he was dying, and then for 30, 40 minutes afterwards. Krishna's arrangement. And it benefited that son probably even more than it did my dad. So we want that kind of arrangement because we know we're probably going to need help. It's like the other day I mentioned my friend Akshobi when he was killed. His buddy Chaitanya Vallabha, who drove him, he's trying to get him to a hospital, and blood is just kind of like pumping out of his chest because it stabbed right in the heart. And he says, Akshobi, man, this is it. Got to remember Krishna. Akshobi says, got it. I'm working on it. This is anena putra-sneham antareṇa. He's chanting out of affection for his son, not out of priti for Vasudeva, for Krishna. Still, because it was innocent, the chanting was innocent, he just kind of went back to these impressions from his childhood that made it easy for him to, as Vaikuntha Prabhu was pointing out yesterday, receive these messages from the antaryami that, name this one Narayan. Do it, do it, do it. And so throughout the last whatever it was, few months, couple of years of his life, he's constantly Narayan this, Narayan that. So we know a lot of devotees who name their kids Narayan. And we used to see memes. Well, actually, this was created by one of my friends, Gaur Narayan, whose parents named him Narayan when he was born. There are two things that just bug the heck out of all the boys, all the Hare Krishna boys named Narayan. One was that their nickname became Ryan. And it just drove them nuts. They couldn't stand it, But the other thing was when adults would, oh, what is your name? They're like little 4.5-year-old Narayan, and says, oh, what is your name? Oh, it's Narayan. Oh, and then they do there was this meme, that, yeah, if you could do such and such, from some movie that I never saw, the guy, set in an office or something, there was this really annoying guy in the film was like, yeah, if you could do such and such a thing, that'd be great. It's like, the tone is, you idiot, can you just do it this way or something like so? Yeah, if you just do it this and such, thus and such, that'd be great. So just like, yeah, if you'd not do the Narada Muni thing, that'd be great. And every kid in ISKCON and all the other sanghas knew exactly what that was about. You know, that was about when an adult would be introduced to a kid and the kid would say his name is Narayana. They go, Narayana, Narayana, like the old goofy Hindi movies, right? Because they always make Narada Muni out to be some kind of like goofball. It's like a trope in old Bollywood movies when they used to be pious, right? That you got to have a goofy Narada Muni and or two goofball brahmanas for some reason, because you got to make fun of the brahmanas because they're all stuffy, they're all full of themselves. So you got to have these two goofballs. Even Nadia Nimai, right? You had the two Panini Bhakaran. You know, they're just going back and forth, you know, goofing on each other. So that's our comic relief in that movie, and it seems like some trope that has to be there. So he chanted the name of his son out of excessive, chanted the name of Narayan out of excessive affection for his son still. The Viṣṇudūtas came. Now, they didn't spare him. They didn't put him on a vimana and take him back home, back to Godhead. Because he'd had, like, whatever it was, 75 years or 75, 80 years of, well, he's probably a teenager when he saw that couple. And you know, a little boy might not be so disturbed by it. I mean, if he was like 11 or something like that. So, you know, maybe 75, 80 years, he's just complete nonsense. So those sanskars were also there. But there's one thing that can overcome them. All the prashchitta in the world can't really overcome those, and that's bhakti. And this is one of the main angas of bhakti, chanting the holy name of the Lord. Just as we see in the second chapter, Jnvatang swakata Krishna punya shravana kirtana. This is hearing, chanting about the glories of the Lord. This is the supremely pious activity. And this is so core to our practice. And we know when Lord Chaitanya is instructing Sanatana Goswami, we see this in the 22nd chapter of Madhya Lila of Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita, he lists the 64 angas of bhakti, the same 64 angas of bhakti that we see in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. Lists the 64 angas of bhakti, and the last 5 are actually repetitions for emphasis because they're especially efficacious. They're especially powerful. I don't remember how it goes in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, but in Sri Chaitanya, at the end of the list, Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita, where the 5 are presented, Nam Kirtan, Sadhu Sangha Nam Kirtan Bhagavat Shravan Mathura Vasa Sri Murtira Shraddhaya Sevana. Sadhu Sangha, associating with devotees, and as I sometimes point out, maybe I haven't done it here yet so I can get away with it. When Rupa Goswami first gives that list that includes Sadhu Sangha, earlier in the second chapter of Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, he defines 3 aspects of the kind of association that we want. Sajati ashaye snigdhe and svatovare. So the line is, Sajati asaye snigdhe, sadhu sangha svatovare. This is the kind of sadhu sangha we want. What is that? Sajati asaye. Jata has to do with birth, class, caste, kind, that kind of thing, family. So jata means from the same crew, same group. We have similar spiritual aspirations. So not Shaivites. They may be very spiritual in their way. Not Shaktas. They may be kind of spiritual in their way, because what they're worshiping is the material energy, right? Which means they really want to exploit her. Right, when you meet a girl, you know, in the 8th grade and you start talking her up in your awkward 8th grade way with your voice breaking and everything, it's not about her. It's about you. You're thinking, oh, okay, maybe Sally West and I, will make a connection or something, and we can go steady, whatever that means in the 8th grade. So they're kind of talking up the material energy, but real spiritual aspirations. They want to love Krishna. Maybe even in the same way. So sajati ashe snigde, affectionately disposed. Because who wants to hang out with people who aren't, right? If somebody is cold and standoffish and aloof, you may think, oh, I really want to get to know this person because everybody says they're really cool. And then after a while, maybe it just turns out to be more trouble than it's worth. And maybe being their friend isn't all that great after all. But someone who's warm, affectionate, open-hearted, they really, really like you. You can't get enough of their company. And and then the third one, svatovare. Svata has to do with the self, like svarupa, your own form, your own body, your own self. And vara means superior. So, sajati ashe snigde sadhu sangha svatovare. And then sadhu sangha nam kirtan, chanting the holy names of the Lord, especially those primary names that have to do with Krishna's relationships with his eternal associates in Vrindavan. So, Nanda Nandana, Sri Nandana, Radha Govinda, Subal Sakha, something like that. And Sadhu Sangha, Nam Kirtan, Bhagavat Shravan, hearing Srimad Bhagavatam, hearing about engaging Machita Magata Prana, Bodhayanta Paraspa, engaging our, getting together and singing the Lord's glories. Just like last night I was thinking about the ultimate kirtan from the original blues singers, the gopis of Braja, when after Krishna ditched them during the rasa dance, and especially after he ditched that girl who's not directly named. She's kind of indirectly referred to by Shukadeva Goswami. The acharyas say because if Shukadeva Goswami were to mention her name outright, he would go into trance, and the clock's ticking on Maharaj Pariksit. He knows that, so he's just got to keep going. So he's, I don't want to go too far into this, just kind of like get through it. Really get the king's mind fixed on the Lord. Bhagavatam, Mathura Vas, living in a holy place like Mathura, Vrindavan, Jagannath Puri, Mayapur. And it doesn't mean you have to live there for the rest of your life, although many people take it like that, and they will. They'll go live in a cave, in Vrindavan, and just chant. But even Prabhupada says, spending a month or 2 weeks or even like 5 days in Mathura Mandala, it's so powerful. And Sri Murtira Shraddhaya Sevana, worshipping the Sri Murti, the holy form of the Lord, with Shraddhaya Sevana, with faith, with affection, with love. So as we see, Mother Sampada has been dressing Sri Sri Radha Giridhari for decades. You can't not appreciate. All the pujaris are very expert here. Everything is so on such a nice standard. But I'm particularly inclined to Sampadas because I know this has been a huge part of her life, even when she's had to work for so many years now, but still, she has her days and she's here. And Radha Giridhari, when we see them, we rock back a little bit on our heels, when that curtain opens. So these are very, very, very powerful. But the chanting of the holy name, among these, the chanting of the holy name is the chief anga. And that's where we land at the very end of the Srimad Bhagavatam, the very last verse of the Srimad Bhagavatam. Nama-saṅkīrtanam yasya sarva papa pranashanam, pranamo dukkha samanas. So let me offer my respectful obeisance to the Supreme Lord. The chanting of whose holy names destroys all sinful reactions. So all the prāyaschitta in the world couldn't really erase Ajamila's, the reactions to the sins that Ajamila had engaged in throughout his life, those many years of his long life. Only Bhakti has that power. And this is the most powerful of the angas of Bhakti. That even if we do it inattentively, even the freeway japa, right, is better than not chanting. I remember trying that when we moved to the mainland, and there'd be long drives from Three Rivers to Visalia, with no traffic. I would think, let me get some rounds done. And very quickly I realized I'm not chanting very nicely because I'm not giving the holy name the attention he deserves. And I'm not driving very nicely Because I am giving the holy, I'm trying to give the holy name all the attention it deserves, and I don't, I might miss what's going on the road. So I just thought, this is not my deal. This won't work for me. I don't have anything to say about anybody else who, feels they need to chant their rounds when they're driving or when they're watching the news or listening to NPR or whatever. I don't know. That's not my business. But I know for myself, it doesn't work. It doesn't work. One of my mottos is, when I chant, I chant. And there's one devotee in Alachua. We all know who he is. We love him. He's a wonderful, wonderful devotee. But if you stay at the temple during japa time after Mangalarti, steer clear of this. Actually, there are two of them. One, because he's got stories about everybody who's ever been in ISKCON, and he'll start regaling with you. And the other one, because he's got some point of philosophy that's been eating at him this week. And he's got his either a little notebook or a little folded piece of paper in his pocket with his pen. You'll see him in the middle of Kirtan at Mangalarti. He'll pull it out because something came, and so he'll engage you in talking philosophy. You won't get any rounds done. The other one will engage you. I love both of these. Everybody loves both of these devotees, but we don't want to be around them during japa time because we want to get our rounds done. We want to focus. And we can't do it around them because they'll distract us one way or the other. So, sarva papa pranasham, and it destroys the reactions to all our sinful behavior. So this is our main practice. This is the groove we want to dig in our hearts, the samskara that we want. We want this nam samskara in our hearts, so that when something distressing happens, it doesn't sound like we just got out of boot camp. But it sounds like we've been through the real boot camp. We've been thoroughly trained. And we go straight to Krishna's name, however faultily. Because Krishna is bhavagrahi janardana, as Vrindavan Das Thakur reminds us in Sri Chaitanya Bhagavat. He accepts the intention. He accepts the devotee's feeling, even if the behavior itself is faulty. And because this is such a powerful thing, Jiva Goswami says, when we're talking about the different offenses in the second chapter of Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, Jiva Goswami says, we're going to engage in seva aparad. It's just going to happen. It can't be that, we're not going to make a mistake along the way when we're doing deity worship. But we always have the shelter of the holy name. So we better not commit offense against the holy name. And here are the 10 offenses that we need to avoid, these 10 things that, different ways of just kind of like poo-pooing, minimize, make the holy name our whole life, just as we were speaking last night. This is what we do. This is who we are. There was an old TV show, Kung Fu: The Next Generation, and I remember the introduction, you had the guy who was playing like the great-grandson of the original Kung Fu guy, same actor. And then his son was a policeman, and he would say, I don't do Kung Fu, I'm a cop, that's who I am, that's what I do. And it would always crack us up. That's who I am, that's what I do. We think, yeah, right. But this is who we are, this is what we do. We are servants, we want to be servants of the holy name. We want those samskaras dug deeply in our hearts, so that when things come to a head for us, that's going to be our shelter. Or we will be in the company of devotees who will make it our shelter, whether we're there or not. I'll stop here because I'm probably way over. Oh yeah, sorry. Questions, comments, quick questions?
Maharaj?
Yes, Prabhu.
We have a question to be offered by Justin Prabhu. Justin Prabhu, please go ahead.
Thank you.
You're welcome, Maharaj.
We need someone to watch the chat box, right?
Hare Krishna.
Justin, Hare Krishna.
You mentioned that worship of the demigods is a step to coming to Krishna consciousness for some people. How would you counsel a devotee who gets upset when they meet that kind of person because they don't acknowledge Krishna as supreme? That makes them upset. What would you say to this devotee?
Well, it's not. It's a step upward. It's a step upward from worshiping ourselves, from worshiping our senses, from worshiping our car. When Srila Prabhupada spoke on this verse in Philadelphia, the title is something about, don't study your car or something like that, And he's talking about our body, our vehicle. So it's a step up from being completely self-centered, that we acknowledge that that whatever we have has a source apart from ourselves, that it's a gift. So it's a lot like, we enjoy this electricity that that gives us, access, helps us use the internet so that we can broadcast our classes, or we can hear the classes that are broadcast from the temples that we like to hear them from, and gives us the light and makes our refrigerators work, the heaters working in the winter, the air conditioning. But the thing is, we can't, we're not creating the electricity. The electricity comes from, the electrical company or the utility or whatever it is. I don't even know who it is anymore in San Diego, because things have changed a lot over the last 20-odd years. But there's going to be a bill on the 4th of the month. Like where we lived on the Big Island, we'd get a bill from Hawaii Electric Light Company, HELCO, which we called HELCO, because if we had big storms, we'd knock our electricity out, and it might take a while for them to get it back online. Those linemen, by the way, on the Big Island, they make real money. I had one of my students, her husband was a lineman, and the guy was making $120,000 a year just being a lineman, because it's dangerous, it's scary. You're out there in a thunderstorm and the pouring rain. So there's a bill to pay. We have to acknowledge that we owe our electricity to the good graces of HELCO. And they might become a little miffed if we ignore them for too long, if we don't pay them their due. So we worship the demigods so that we can get some material benefit. And it's a step up because we're acknowledging that there's a source. So the thing is, when we encounter someone who's into worshiping the demigods, we can acknowledge that, and we can remind them that actually there's a perspective where the demigods are subordinate to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. It's not a bad thing necessarily that you do that, but you understand that's, from our perspective anyway, that's not the highest goal. There's a line in the Bhagavatam that appears twice. In the 11th canto, in the Uddhava Gita, I think at the end of the 20th chapter, toward the end of the 20th chapter, and maybe the 2nd or 3rd verse of the 21st chapter, Sve Svedhikaryanishta Saguna Hari-kīrtana. It's a good quality to understand where you are and behave accordingly, and it's a flaw to do otherwise. So if that's where someone is, then we don't need to lay a heavy trip on them, which we all did when we were new converts. One of the obstacles that we have to overcome in our sadhana is utsaha mayi, the first one, right? Utsaha mayi, this undeserved enthusiasm. Somehow or other, we're just really excited about being engaged in bhakti yoga, and we think, oh, I've been chanting 16 rounds for 3.5 weeks, and it was really nice this morning. I must be a pure devotee, If I got hit by a truck today, I would obviously go back home, back to Godhead. I find myself in the middle of the rasa dance, or something. But once we overcome, and we get excited if we see other people, they can't join our church. This is the Kanishta's mentality. That they have some faith in God, but they have some faith in their God. We used to go door to door in Honolulu back in the early 70s, and one of the ways that doors would be slammed in our face was people would say, well, we have our own God, bam! And I was out door to door with one of my dear brahmachari friends. I don't want to name him. But it was like one time too many, and as the door was slamming in our face, he says, what do you do, keep in a cage? So, it's a stage of bhakti But it's not a very elevated stage of bhakti. It's a rather narrow-minded way of thinking that, I can see God in my church. God lives among my people. It's a kind of tribalism. But they because their vision is kind of narrow, they can't see who's a devotee. And therefore, they don't know how to behave properly with devotees. Whereas the Madhyama Bhakta has a broader vision. The Madhyama Bhakta is able to see four broad categories: God, the devotees, the innocent, and those who are actually inimical. And they behave differently with those different categories of personalities. They love the Lord. They make friends with devotees. They're compassionate, kind to the innocent. And they just don't have any time for the envious, for the actual atheists, the hardcore atheists. They don't have time to argue with them. So when we have a broader vision, then we can see, well, this person's coming along. At least, he's not like, robbing banks, to get, to get a fix or something like that, or just going around nastily exploiting people. And so we behave with them in a way that will help instill some faith in them. Or if they have a little faith, grow their faith. Just I was saying, the different Puranas, they have different focuses for different kinds of people. So some of the Puranas exalt Devi, the goddess of the material energy, Maya, Durga, as the ultimate goal of life, to give people that kind of faith. But Narada Muni, he wasn't impressed by those books when he saw that Vyasadeva was. When he saw that Vyasadeva was depressed, he just took him to school, showed him just exactly what was missing. All this stuff that's missing direct glorification, he says, it's like a dump, right? A place of pilgrimage for crows. Who wants to hang out there? I mean, when we see those films, like Pawakatsi, Koyanakatsi, or something like that, and you see the people with their little village at the end of the landfill, and they're running around the steaming landfill, and they're picking, they're looking for garbage they can take to a recycling place and sell, so they can have, some flour to make chapatis tonight for their family. We feel so much pity for them, But some people, they go to the dump just to kind of hang out and dig it. As a little boy, I used to think the dump was a cool place because there was, there was broken stuff that you could fix or something like that. That's where I discovered safety glass on cars. The cars that would be left at the dump, in the early 50s, they'd have safety glass, and it would have, that pattern, that something smashes the glass, because there's that plastic laminated in between the two layers of glass. It just kind of holds together, and you got this pattern. And I would think, oh, that's cool. Oh, look, like little diamonds. You break a piece off, and it's like little diamonds, But, I mean, who really wants to do that? People become rag pickers out of necessity, not because they think the dump's a cool place or the alley is a cool place. We had our own rag picker here, Mother Vrajavadu. She would comb the alleys all over San Diego and find cloths that she could bring back, wash, and use them to clean the temple. And then she'd clean the temple with them. Amazing. In her 80s and 90s even. And she got around on the bus. So we want to interact with such folks in a way that creates some faith, because spiritual progress, as it's measured by those 9 stages or the 14 stages that Viṣṇudūta Chakravarti Thakur suggests a couple of verses later in the 2nd chapter of the Bhagavatam. It's really a growing of faith, a deepening of faith. So we want to behave with them in such a way that they get some faith. It's an offense to explain, especially the specific glories of the holy name to those who don't have any faith. So first of all, we want to plant some faith. Is that okay, Justin?
Yes, Maharaj. As to be expected, a breathtaking, wonderful answer to my question.
Uh-oh. Vijay Krishna is training us all. Is there anything else quickly before the hook comes?
I have a question.
Maharaj, I do have a question, but it's late already. Maybe of course, the temple room devotees, they want to present their contribution.
Oh, it looks like there is one. How late? Oh my gosh.
Just quickly, I'm just wondering about the approach of death, and what do we feel in our mind, and how aware we are of that? Is it more of a train coming from a distance, or more like a stroke of lightning? How do we feel in the mind, and how aware we are?
Well, first of all, I mean, one thing we should be aware of is that we don't know when it's when it'll come. As I mentioned the other day, at my age, it's like progressively miraculous. Every morning you wake up alive, because some nights you lie down, you think, as you're starting to sink into oblivion, you think, well, what if this is it? Are my affairs in order? Is my room straight enough that when they come and find my body, that they're going to find all kinds of like little weird things that I really this is what I really spend my time doing, or something like that. We don't know when it's going to come. It's progressively miraculous each day, especially when you get close to 30 like I am. You just don't, there's no guarantee that we'll make it through the day. Like, I mentioned my friend Akshobhya the other day. So it could come like a bolt of lightning, or it could come creeping on little cat feet, right? We don't know. So we want to kind of do what we can, practice as assiduously as we can, so that we will create those samskaras in our chitta, in our subtle body, in our hearts ultimately, so that when the time comes, we'll go there, like Gajendra, like Ajamila. And as we progress, it becomes more like an embrace rather than a threat. It's like I have a friend on the Big Island, dear friend, dear sister, who's dying. And so I have some prayers that I offer for devotees, and she asked me to pray for her, that she might be able to fix her feet on the Lord, fix her mind on the lotus feet of the Lord and our beloved spiritual master Śrīla Prabhupada. So every day I pray to my I include that. That's actually the first one. Once I get past my, the namaskar part, and then as Dravida has described it sometimes, and the offering, praising the Lord, and then stating my own position, and then we present our petition, and hers right now is first in line. Please help my dear friend Jagadatri, and all the devotees who live there, and all the devotees who don't even live there are doing their best to help her. I have to make sure it's on my list to give her a call today. I saw she liked a couple of Facebook things of mine yesterday, so I know she's still kicking. So we do our best, and as we progress, it becomes more and more like an embrace. It's an adventure. That's how I kind of present it, as her next devotion. Get her ready for her next devotional adventure, whatever it is. Does that help a little? Vijay Krishna, how much trouble will we get me into?
Maharaj, how may I serve you?
Did you have a comment or a question?
Yes, Maharaj, very quickly, you're very kind. Maharaj, when I chant, I do not chant because I am in love with Krishna. I chant because of fear of becoming punished by Krishna in the case that I refuse to chant, because chanting is the prescribed religious practice for this age of Kali. So based on this, my question is, what is the difference between chanting in fear and chanting in love?
Well, thank you for the wonderful question. It's actually an essential question.
You're welcome, Maharaj.
And applicable, of course, to all of us. How many of us have actually attained priti or prema? So it's a practice. And we get better at it, and the love, I'm assured by the acharyas. I don't have personal experience, but I have it on the authority of the great acharyas, that love gradually grows as we continue in our practice. And this might be, although the time might contravene it, but this might be my one chance to share one of my favorite anecdotes along this line from the material world. This is about Maestro Pablo Casals, who for a large part of the 20th century was considered the greatest cellist in the world. He was at least the most renowned cellist in the world. And there's a story that a young reporter told about interviewing Maestro Casals in his 90s. So he's in his 90s, and his performing career was like way back in the rearview mirror. And but during the course of the interview, he mentioned that he practiced several hours a day, something like 3, 4, 5, 6 hours a day practice. And he says, by practice, I don't mean playing pieces that I like. I mean running scales and doing exercises. And she asked him, why is that? Why do you spend so much of your day practicing? I mean, you're the greatest cellist in the world. And he just shrugged. He said, I think I'm making progress. So we practice. Practice doesn't, we say practice, we have this saying in English, practice makes perfect. We're not after perfection, we're after progress, at least at our stage, most of our stage. So, if we keep chanting, there's a story about Srila Prabhupada playing mridanga beats on his belly, and someone asked him, Srila Prabhupada, how are you able to do that? And he said, practice. So, we simply keep practicing. Here, with Gajendra, it was anxiety, fear of death, imminent death. And here, it's the same thing with the Ajamila. Although he was 88 years old, he should have known it was coming. All of a sudden, here it is. He's confronted with the Yamadūtas. And he's scared out of his wits. But he's scared, and he's chanting the name of Narayana. And because it's innocent, he gets this wonderful result of not going back home, back to Godhead, but he gets another shot, a better chance. That's a beginning of an answer. And the acharyas will do nothing but encourage us in our practice. Keep going. And as they say, it gets better every day. So we have that on the authority of the acharyas, if not by our own experience. Does that help a little bit, Prabhu?
Oh, Maharaj, again, as to be expected, better than helpful. Very, very pleasing to the heart answer to my question. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.
Thank you again for the essential question. Let's stop here for the day, because Krishna is waiting for us in another form. Grantaraja Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Gaur Bhakta Vrinda ki jai. Pancha kalpatarubhyashta kapasindhubhya evacha patitanam pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo